Broadcast is live. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to COSI Connects, another fantastic STEM programmatic initiative for you. We are partnering with none other than the great NASA, the North American Space Agency, to bring you unparalleled programming so that you can learn about STEM from womb to tomb. My name is Dr. Frederic Bertley, President and CEO of COSI, the Center of Science and Industry here in Central Ohio, specifically in Columbus. And, you know, we always bring you talents. We always bring you amazing people, not just to show them off, but to show them off in a way that they can inspire you to take on really cool careers and have really cool options in your lives. And that's what this program is about. That's what COSI Connects is about. If you haven't visited us, go to cosi.org, COSI Connects. You can see a universe of STEM content for free. All kinds of stuff for all kids of all ages, for teachers, for parents. COSI Connects, check it out. Now let me get to the program. NASA is one of our best partners, and they have an incredible legacy program where they share their wealth, their talent, their treasure with the public to showcase the really cool things that they do. One of the coolest things they're doing is working on that next voyage to that small stone, you know, just a little bit away in space that you see at night called the moon. It's actually called the Artemis Project. It is really exciting, but I won't talk about it. I'll let the experts share. So with that, we're going to have a conversation with NASA's Space Launch System, otherwise known as SLS, if you're cool, team member Brent Hartsfield. So let me give you a little background here. Mr. Hartsfield served as the point of contact for the SLS Avionics Lab and as the senior technical lead. He's worked with Boeing, he's worked with Jacobs and NASA in preparation for what's called the Green Run itself, which you're going to hear about, setting up the core stage avionics in our life-size facility. It doesn't get cooler than that. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to introduce to you Mr. Hartsfield. Now, he's going to give a presentation for about 25 minutes or so. If you have any questions, send them in on the chat. We'll come to them. I'll read them out, and we'll have a discussion with him and hear how cool working at NASA is, how much cooler working on Artemis is, and how much even cooler Mr. Hartsfield is. Mr. Hartsfield, take it away, please.
Oh, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. And I tell you, I'm just tickled to be able to share this story. It's just absolutely fantastic. My opportunity to work in the SIL, to work on the Artemis program itself, has been just an absolute wonderful experience. So thanks for having me, and thanks for inspiring all these young minds that are out there. So whenever you guys are ready, let's put the screen up there, and we'll start walking through it. So let's go ahead and do the first slide, or the second slide, please. So a little bit about the Artemis program. Many of you guys may remember when we last went to the moon, that was the Apollo program. And we called this program Artemis. That's the sister to Apollo. She's actually considered Greek mythology, goddess of the moon. And so we thought it would be appropriate to have a sister to take us back up there. Even more appropriate, we're going to have the first woman to step on the moon. So what better name to call it would be Artemis. Absolutely fantastic. Ultimately, we're going to end up back on the moon, and it's going to be a great training ground for our next goal, which is Mars. And that's the goal in hand right there. We'll talk a little bit about that as we progress. So many folks want to know where we're going to land on the moon. So this is a screenshot of what it looks like on the south pole of the moon. That's where our goal is. We're going to land on the south pole. That's because we get the best lighting down there. And why would we want good lighting? Not because we can see at night, which is kind of handy, but we're going to have some solar panels and other power generation so we can stay on the surface longer this time. Back in the Apollo days, we could only stay down there for just about half an hour or so, and then we got better at staying a little bit longer. We want to stay for days on end now, and the only way we can do that is have some kind of power generation. We're going to be doing some habitat development and things of that nature. There's going to be some good frozen suspects that we can go look at, like maybe water. I don't know, maybe there's some water up there, or maybe there's some other things that we want to find that we can use as development for a more permanent habitat. So the actual south pole of the moon is the most ideal place to land. You don't have a lot of obstacles there. Line of sight to the Earth for communication. Although here just recently, I hear that we are going to be putting some satellite communication up there. So, hey, maybe our astronauts can carry their cell phones with them. That's going to be pretty cool. That was announced earlier this week. Let's go ahead to the next slide. So some folks will ask about how do we get there and what drives all the design and the size of these rockets that are out there. It really comes down to the mission itself. If we're only going to go up to the International Space Station, what we call the ISS, then we don't need a rocket that big because we are not going that far. So the mission to go to the ISS doesn't require that much. We're only going to go about 3 hours from launch to the proximity of the ISS. We're going to go about 17,500 miles an hour. So that's less propellant that's needed. And it's only about 250 miles up. So it's pretty easy to get there. I mean, just for some statistics for you, to get to 17,500 miles an hour, it takes about 8 minutes on the SLS vehicle. That is from the initial light of the boosters to the core stage being done, and it sends the astronauts off to do their work. That's getting up there pretty quick, and that's moving along. But the other things, like if we're going to go out to the moon, we've got some other problems that we have to overcome. Part of that is we've got to escape the gravity of Earth. Earth is kind of selfish like that. It wants to keep us here. It likes us. But when we're really determined to go over to our next door neighbor, you've got to go a little faster than that to escape gravity. So we're going to be shooting for 24,000, almost 25,000 miles an hour. And we're going to be going about 240,000 miles away. So that takes us about 3 days to get there. And that's not sitting around wasting time. That's getting after it. We'll actually launch from the surface. We'll do a little loop-de-loop around the Earth and use it as a slingshot and fling ourselves out toward the moon. And then we'll be captured by the moon's gravity and do a few loop-de-loops up there before we're in orbit, called a translunar injection, and the orbit, the injection there. Ultimately, we're heading to Mars. Well, that's going to be a little bit more of a design change. It's a bigger rocket. We have exploration upper stage will come into play there. That gives us more fuel, more propellant, more weight that we can carry with us. If you think about it for a second, if I'm only going to go up to the ISS, I don't need to carry that much supplies unless I'm going to stay there for a while. If I'm going to go to the moon for 3 days, I've got to carry more with me because I can't stop off at the local convenience store and pick up something to drink or maybe a snack. I need to bring it with me. And when I get there, I need to have all the tools with me when I arrive. So I need to carry more weight. Well, now let's take that further out and let's go to Mars. We're going 9 months to Mars. We've got to go a lot faster because even though we're at the moon, there's still some gravity in play here. But to truly escape all of that, we've got to really get moving after that. That's 39 million miles away. And you got to carry a whole lot of snacks with you if you're going to go that far away. Let's go ahead. So a little bit about the vehicle itself. The Space Launch System or the SLS, is the largest vehicle we have ever built. Now, if you stand that up next to the actual Apollo program, this first one that we launched is a little bit shorter, but it's got a whole lot more power to it. So you see a little side by side there compared to the Statue of Liberty. The first one, Artemis 1, that we're going to be flying is going to be 322 feet tall. Once we start doing the Block 2 that has Orion on it, that has the crew on it and a lot more cargo, that's almost 364 feet. Now, to put that into perspective, has anyone out there actually run a mile and been timed? Yep, there you go. So have I, and it's a ugly experience for fat guys like myself. But to give you a little perspective of distance, this vehicle is 1/14 of a mile long, and I used to walk that over at the SIL, the System Integration Lab. That's the full length of the building is 1/10 of a mile. This thing, we could lay it down inside that building. It's absolutely fascinating how big this really is. And you can see the one that we're going to send the crew up there on with that a little bit taller configuration is a little bit taller than the Apollo system, the Saturn V. Now, just for perspective, a little bit of thrust calculations there. The solid rocket boosters are what gets us initially off the ground. Now, that's going to be the workhorse of the entire thing. Their job is to get us started and overcome the biggest amount of gravity that's going to be out there. So these are 5-segment boosters that we have. The space shuttle had 4 segments. Our 5-segment boosters have a solid core inside. They actually pour it in, and it has a little core that has a what's called a thrust profile. So think of it like if it's got just a center hole in the middle of it, it's going to have so much thrust. If it has a star shape in the middle, it has more thrust because there's more surface to burn. What you're about to see here, this little animation, is when they were testing it out. Now, some of that things that you see flying out, that's called the plug. They actually plug up the bottom of it so nothing can spark inside, and also so no moisture gets in there and gets in the way. The overall thrust of the solid rocket boosters is absolutely insane when you get right down to it. Each one of them 177 feet tall. That's about 17 stories tall. That's a pretty big solid rocket booster. You can imagine. I mean, even the boosters were taller than the Statue of Liberty alone, not talking about the actual core rocket itself. They will burn 5.5 tons of propellant in, let's see here, about the first 2 minutes. And then they drop off when they're empty, and the core stage continues on into space. It's all total. It's an 8-minute flight to space. And you'll be moving at about, I'd say about Mach 25 by the time you get ready to get busy. Absolutely fascinating. And you see that they're tied to the sides there. Now at the bottom, we have the engines, the RS-25 engines of the core stage. The core stage, so do you guys remember on the shuttle, there were 3 engines that used to hang off the back of the shuttle, and they were kind of pointed up a little bit. Those were RS-25 engines. On the bottom of our core stage, you see them in that picture with the red covers on them. There are 4 on the bottom of our core stage. Now, here's the cool part about it. Everybody's talking about reusability these days. That's a pretty good idea, don't you reckon? Each one of these engines for the first 3 Artemis missions are former shuttle engines. We took them, we saved them, we refurbished them, and we put them on the back of this rocket so they can serve one more time. The problem with that is they're going to serve just one more time. This will be their swan song. They won't be coming back other than in a blaze of glory. We're going to let them burn up in the atmosphere. And what better way to go than to go in a blaze of glory? So that is absolutely fantastic. So a little bit more about those engines there. They can really push a lot of thrust. We have 12 of them left over, and there's a few left over for spare parts and additional build. The videos that you're watching there, they're getting ready to do some tests on each one of them. They will run at about 12 million horsepower apiece. That's each. So that's like 13 Hoover dams. I mean, if you can kind of put it, I mean, it's just hard to get your mind wrapped around that much power. What you're looking there is one of the engines that's being tested, and you see all of that smoke and cloud and all that. That's really just a big cloud. And you see the rainbow that was out there. That's called rocket rain, because we are fueling this with liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen. And if you think back on your science days, hydrogen and oxygen make water. So that's a pretty clean burning rocket right there. And then we blow a lot of water into it to kind of suppress the noise. So a lot of folks will ask, why is all that water blowing around when we get ready to launch? That's not to put the fire out. That's to make it quieter. Kind of neat, isn't it? Yeah. So what you're looking at right here on the core stage is the back end of the core stage with our engines attached. That orange is a foam that's on the outside of it. It's sprayed on, and then it's shaped to a good size. We learned a long time ago that if you paint this, it actually adds many, many thousands of pounds of weight to the vehicle, and the foam will stay on just fine. And we've gotten really good at making it stay on. Matter of fact, the new lab that I'm involved in right now actually tests the foam as it's attached to the skin. We'll bend and break on it to see if it will actually detach so we can get better at it, which is really kind of cool. I mean, what better thing to do with your time nowadays than to be paid to break things and then tell everybody all about it? It's really kind of nice. But in the reality is we do our job in a lab like that. So when this bad boy right here goes flying, it doesn't break. Our mission is safety and success. It's not successful failure. Here it is loaded into the B2 test stand, which is absolutely fantastic. You see it sticking up there in the middle. They loaded that from the barge, the Pegasus barge, which is just there a little bit below. It's the super guppy of all barges. It'll fit in there laying down, and then they'll pull it out. We've got a little animation that shows them loading here in just a second. The green run that we're talking about today will be all 4 of those RS-25 engines being fired at the same time. The most thrust that's ever been kicked off in NASA history. It is absolutely powerful.
Wow.
Now, also in the green run, there's a series of tests that we'll talk about here in just a few minutes. You see that yellow thing on the top that looked like a little cap? That's called the spider. It's basically they're palming the top of it like it's a ball, like you're palming a ball to pick it up. That is 12 pins that will hold the top of that as it's suspended when they lower it into the B2 test stand. But you're not just testing can the engines fire. You're testing all of the avionics that go along with it. You want to make sure that all of the avionics components will work together, talk together, and function like they're supposed to. And I'm going to use a simple term here, does the gas gauge tell you that it's really empty, or how much fuel is in there, or how much pressure is inside the tank? Does the flight computers turn on the systems at the right time? Does it control the valves when it's supposed to? Each one of these tests that you're looking at here, called the green run, will put the core stage through these series of tests to validate each one of those will work. And you notice there's several different sections in that diagram on the side. You have the bottom at the bottom, it's called the boat tail. That's where the engines are. That's the engine section. Moving up from there, the liquid hydrogen tank. Then you have the inner tank. That's where power components are. Batteries are there. We have giant lithium-ion batteries that are about the size of a lunchbox, if you will. There's 4 of them on there. The flight computers are up on the forward skirt, that little block at the top above the liquid oxygen tank. All 3 of those avionics rings that were loaded up in the sill, stacked on top of each other, had all the cables connected together, and we could test it before we went and put it on the real rocket itself. Now the green run is going to test it on the real rocket. It's going to test it with real fuel, with real engines, and we're going to validate that everything we simulated is going to work like we expected. So it looks like we have a question. Why is the SLS using the RS-25 instead of the RS-68A? It comes back down to that reusability. Reusability is you've got an engine that is tried true. It's been proven with millions of flight times, millions of minutes of flight time. It's a proven technology. So the choice really came down to, do you want to go with one that is solid for decades of use, that all you've got to do is tweak it just a little bit extra, you get a little more out of it, and you already have 4 on hand, so you're already saving money? Or do you want to go with something new and different and try and reinvent the wheel? I'm all about, if you got something that works, use that. So a little bit about Artemis mission itself. Let's talk a little bit about that. And I'm going to change a couple of my slides because I've gotten behind myself. So the first flight of the SLS vehicle is going to be unmanned. So there's not going to be anyone on it. We're going to fly it out to the moon and back again. We'll do a double loop-to-loop and then come on back. The whole point behind this is to prove the system works, and it works. It can be remotely controlled, much like the some of our commercial partners that have tested these things out. That we'll get to the moon safely and back again before we risk human life on a future flight. So we will go ahead. So a lot of folks want to know a little bit about the launch sequence. We got a little bit of animation here. this is similar to what we used to do in the SEAL when we would fly an animation out. It takes about 40 hours to tank the vehicle. And that's because you don't want to just dump it in there. You want to rise it, fill the tanks at a nice, slow, even pace. You'll start probably about an hour out. You'll start warming up the computers and getting them powered up and ready to go. Then about at T-minus 30 seconds, you start really bearing down on system checks. You start lighting the engines. The engines will come on, and they'll burn for about 30 seconds. And you have a very, very small window before you can abort the system, because once you light the solid rocket boosters, there's no coming back. The beautiful part about the core stage is you can shut it down. But the solid rocket boosters, it's like lighting a match. It's going to burn till it's done. And so you might want to be holding on for that ride. Now, the cool thing about it is there's that sound suppression I was telling you about. They'll light them up a little bit. They're going to think about it, and then they're fixing to go. Now, there's a point when we're launching, and I'm blanking out a little bit right now on what it's called, but it's basically where we reach, max Q, where we meet maximum pressure in the atmosphere. So right now we're at sea level, and we have the pressure that's pushing down on us. As you go further and further out, you have less pressure, less atmosphere to push against. But as you are launching and you're getting faster and faster as you go up through the atmosphere, that resistance with the atmosphere starts pushing on the nose cone of the vehicle. And you reach a point where if you don't slow down a little bit, you'll actually crush the front of the vehicle. And that's kind of dangerous. People usually frown upon that. So we actually will throttle down a little bit when we pass through max Q. And then you'll hear that go for throttle up, although it's automated in this case. But in the shuttle days, that's what they would go for throttle up. And then that means we've passed max Q, and you can really turn on the afterburner, so to speak, and you can get on out of here. And it's safe to do that. You'll also have a couple other things as you empty out the solid rocket boosters. You'll shed that weight off, so you have less to carry with you. You don't want to be carrying a lot of weight. You'll start shedding off the core stage once you burn the core stage out. And then you get further out into space, but you're still captured by the atmosphere, and so you shed more. You'll shed off panels, and you'll shed off the abort system. Every piece that you let go of and let it fall back to burn up in the atmosphere is less weight you have to carry to escape Earth's gravity. It's actually pretty fascinating. So we got a picture here in just a little bit about the inside of the capsule itself. Talking a little bit about the Artemis 2, that's going to be when we actually put men and women on the capsule. Here's a picture of our astronauts inside the Orion capsule. They're going through their training paces. You see our captain and pilot there. And then down below, if you look carefully, you'll see the additional crew members down below. And you can even look through over to the left there. You can look out the window, and you can see it's inside one of our buildings where they're training the astronauts up. And some of our technicians and engineers are looking in to make sure that our astronauts are going to be able to perform the duties that we put them through. Now, they're going to have to be in tight quarters for a little while here on their first trip. They're not really going to get out that much. Artemis 3 is when we put our boots on the ground. That's the one that counts right there. Well, they all count. Don't let me fool you for a minute, but that's the one where we put boots on the ground and we start talking about landers. We have a system called the Human Lander System, human landing there. We have 3 competitors that are shooting for that goal right there. One of them is made by Dynetics. That's the one that looks like a big rabbit over there. Those are solar panels that they're using. That's a pretty attractive design because it's a lot lower to the surface. So you have a smaller staircase to go in and out of. The next one is made by SpaceX. It's a little bit more of that throwback to the cartoon rockets of older days, but at the same time, it can land itself and it can take itself off like you've been seeing. There's actually a Facebook following. No, it's a YouTube following where they're testing their launches at Boca Chica down in Texas. You could go out there and look at that if you want to watch that. It's kind of fascinating. And now that one, you have to crawl down It looks like they actually are lowering like an elevator or something like that down the side of it, which is a lot safer. That's a good thing. You don't want to crawl down a ladder that tall. The third one is kind of based off of the old Apollo days, the lander. Remember, the Eagle has landed. Well, that's just a big version of it right there with our third. That's ULA that's doing that. And so you get to stay a little bit longer there. It's kind of a tried and true configuration. You'll probably leave behind the lander system, and you'll have the capsule to go up from there. So each one of those is working on their designs, and they're making some good progress. And that's what we're going to be using when we go down to actually land on the surface, stay around for a little while. A couple of the other things we're going to be doing when we get there, we're going to, obviously we want to get some moon buggies out there and go four-wheeling across the moon again. It gives us a bigger range of distance that we can go and explore and to chase down the different minerals and resources that we're going to need in order to try and build a permanent habitat there. You see in the back one concept of a lander system with solar panels on it. That's going to give you your power that you need to do. If any of you are interested in alternative energy, this would be a really good place for you to apply that curiosity. Think about it for a second. Every spacecraft that is in space right now is using batteries or some kind of alternative energy to supply its power needs. Well, that's DC power. That's not necessarily AC power. We don't fly with extension cords plugged in back at the launch pad. We have to let go. So when we get up there to the moon, that's solar panel. That's just like all of the solar panels that we see going on top of rooftops and in these big solar farms. So if you're curious about that stuff, there's a good application for you to explore. So we're also going to have a thing up there called the Gateway. Now, when we fly out there on the Orion, remember, you saw that picture. It's going to be a little bit cramped out there in the Orion capsule. Better than the old Apollo days, but it's still cramped. So once we get to the moon, we will stretch our legs a little bit. We're going to have basically International Space Station 2.0. We call it the Gateway or the Space Gateway. This is our launching off point that will take us to deep space exploration. Here in this picture, you see the Orion capsule up on top where our astronauts have come in and docked with the Gateway. And then you see a lander that's attached to the side of it. The lander will be used to go down to the surface and come back again, docking with the Gateway before moving on back into the Apollo, the Orion capsule and returning to Earth. So it's really the Orion turns into a nice ferry or taxi service to the Gateway where our folks can stay for extended periods of time and work on some of those more interesting gravity anomalies. You got some dark of the moon things as it's going around the backside of it. And you can have crews that will come and go, but you have a permanently manned space station, much like what we've got right now. Also, you can use this for the launching off point going to Mars. Now, a lot of folks will ask, why in the world would we put all of this technology on the moon when ultimately our goal is to go to Mars? Well, it's a whole lot easier to figure out a problem when you're only 3 days away than if you're 9 months away. So what better way to validate our technology, our progress, and how we're going to do it on a hostile planet-like thing called the moon before we get to Mars, which is going to be just as hostile, just a whole lot further from Walmart. So you kind of get a little bit of depiction of what we're there. By the time we get out to Mars, we're going to have a whole lot of these technologies solidified, and we'll be able to go up there a lot better prepared for the distance. Kind of exciting right there, I'll tell you. Ultimately, that's going to be the goal. So many of you may be asking, well, how do I get involved in a program like this? I mean, it's pretty exciting to be involved in this, to get to see all this stuff. There's a lot of things you can do. For those of you who are in high school or maybe in college, you can become an intern at NASA. I personally have hosted the Growing Young Minds High School Intern Program for some local high schools here in Huntsville. We actually will bring them out during their last semester in high school for 12 weeks every day, and we will treat them just like the engineers here on site. So when they walk away, they have skill sets that have to do with electrical engineering, circuit board design, how to wire properly using industry standards, how to read a drawing, how to present to large groups, because one of their projects is to present to about 150 people before they leave. And that's in a virtual environment, much like this. Our college interns are actually paid interns. They get to come back and they'll get hands on the equipment, and they're paid to do projects for whatever it is. Our high schoolers don't get to touch the vehicle itself, but our college ones, we start grooming them more for a career with NASA. You can go into welding, you can do launch pad construction, you can do flight control, food, avionics. There's all kinds of things that you can do to come on board here. Social media, if you're not into electrical things or maybe propulsion or mechanical engineering, you can do spacesuit design, robotics. Many of you may know of a robotics program in your high schools or in college, then that's a great thing to do. If you learn geology, I mean, think about it. We're going to go to a giant rock floating around our Earth, and we're going to look at the rocks up there. It might be a good idea to know what you're looking at. Why not be a geologist? Because we're kind of interested in stuff like that, how we can use it to build habitats and power ourselves. And there's all kinds of other things. If you like swimming, you can be an astronaut trainee or go diving. So that's the SLS program in a nutshell. There's certainly a lot of more information that I can certainly share with you. It's all exciting. I know that Dr. B has got some questions, and I know you guys have some questions. So why don't we go ahead, open it up for questions. These are some, just one last thing. These are some places that you can follow the SLS journey. Be ready for Green Run. We'll finish up the testing at the end of the month, and we are scheduled to light all 4 engines on the 14th of November. So put that on your calendar and get ready to watch it on Facebook, because I guarantee you we're going to bring some servers down with that one.
Folks, this was fantastic. You were listening to Mr. Hartsfield. He is part of the incredible Artemis team that's going to have the next mission, next 3 missions, frankly, on the moon. Of course, he's working with NASA. This is brought to you live through COSI Connects, our digital portal to a universe of science. I hope you are as excited about this program as I am. I can hardly contain myself. I wish I could put on one of those astronaut suits, Mr. Hartsfield, and be on that journey with you all. But I want to ask the first question, kind of to pick off where you ended, because you talked about the incredible diverse careers that you can have as part of NASA. And I love what you shared, and it's so important, because a lot of times people think, oh, I can only become an astronaut. Now, that would absolutely be cool, but there are so many other great job opportunities. So a little bit about your background. How did you get into this? How did you kick off your career?
I came to NASA actually through information technology. My degree is information systems management. It's actually a business degree, but it is solidified in the software programming and development, data administration, data manipulation, and engineering. So I came at it from that direction. If you think about it for a second, every flight is going to generate over 12 million terabytes of data. Well, that's a lot of data for you to kind of chew through. So that's how I got into my career through my degree, but I didn't think I was good enough for NASA, and that was my biggest mistake. So I didn't apply for it. I sold myself short, and I said, I'm going to go out there and not follow my dream a little bit, because I didn't think I was good enough. I didn't have the stellar grades that I probably should have, and so I didn't apply. And when I went through my first interview, probably about 6 years ago, when someone approached me because of some of the alternative energy things that I was playing with actually in my barn. They said, well, hey, why don't you come on down here and apply for this job? I said, okay, sure, I'll do that. I'll give it a shot. I'm getting up there, and I might as well take a shot at it. So I did. And at the end of the interview, the most thing that struck me, they asked, what took you so long? Well, they couldn't believe that I sold myself short. And so if I could give any advice to anyone out there, don't fool yourself into thinking you're not good enough. The background here, anybody can get a job here. It doesn't matter where you come from. It doesn't matter what you look like, what you think, what you feel, or anything like that. It's all what's up here. If you bring it, they will train it. They will teach it. If you have a desire, if you have the love for space and the achievement that NASA has, put your name in, apply for it. We'd love to have you. Come on.
That is a fantastic message. You heard it here, folks, on COSI Connects, bringing you to Universe of Science. We are talking to Mr. Hartsfield, an incredible engineer, scientist, IT technical expert, part of the Artemis project. I know you have a lot of questions. If you put your questions on the chat, please either put your name if you're comfortable and or the school you're from. We'll read your question. We'll get to those in a minute. Another question for you, Mr. Hartsfield. Okay, so you walked us through the green run. What makes a successful test? What ultimately are you guys looking for when you do these tests?
Great question. Really great question. Everything you do, you are learning something from. The lab that I'm currently in right now, I actually get paid to break things in two. Well, is that a success or is that a failure? Well, yes, it is a failure. It broke. But now I know when it broke. And now I know how much power it takes to break it. That is a success if it's within what I expect it to break at. So how do you define success? Every Artemis mission, every test that we do, every engine fire, every piece of metal that we break into, everything that we do, we have an expected failure point, and we want it to be much beyond what we want it to perform at. So if we want to perform at 100%, we want it to break at 300%. So we have range. We have a little bit of extra there in the tank, so to speak. So success for me is anything well above 100% of what I expect it to perform at. A good case in point, the RS-25 engines, they operated 109% thrust. Okay, how do you do that? Well, that's easy. We baselined them at 100% way back in the shuttle days, and then we kept tweaking and working on them, and now they operated at 109%. That's success.
That's really cool. That is really cool. I would love to be paid to break things up. That's awesome. Let me take some of the questions from the chat. So we have one from Lester from Facebook. Is there an age limit to work at NASA? And you might answer that both minimum and maximum. Is there an age limit?
There is no age limit. Now, I would offer up this. We have hired high school students straight out of high school, have to be 18 years old because we do work with dangerous things. We do have intern programs that you can come in at 17 years old, but you are limited on what you can do and what you can be around because we're very concerned about safety in everything we do. In the office place and on the rocket itself and everywhere in between, it's all about safety. As far as how old can you be, we've got some folks out here that I'm convinced were here before the mountains grew. We call them graybeards. They've been out here forever and a day. They're 40, 50 years in their career, not in age. And we welcome them all. There is a knowledge that you do not want to lose with those folks. Now, ultimately, you do have retirements, but yeah, we've got folks that are out here. As long as they can perform the job as necessary, we'll take you. Come on.
That is great. Listen, you heard from Mr. Hartsfield from NASA. He's part of the Artemis project. He said, don't ever sell yourself short. If you have a dream of being part of the NASA team, put your application in. Just work hard, dream hard, and it can achieve it. 2, don't worry about age. We have something for you at NASA. Very good stories. You might get my application. Just don't tell my board of trustees that, Mr. Hartsfield. All right. Having said that, I want to go to the next question. This is a 3-part question. It's related to Mars. And the question is, talk about how the Artemis mission is paving the way to Mars. And I know you talked about it early on. You talked about going to ISS, then you talked about going to the moon and going further to Mars. But for this questioner, talk about the Artemis mission and how it's paving the way to Mars. That's 1. 2, will the same rockets be used? And 3, is there a date yet set for Mars?
Okay, so first things first, how is the Artemis missions paving the way to Mars? So I mentioned that we're only 3 days away from Earth, and we're using the moon to prove the technology's out. Once we get to Mars, we need to have a place to live. So we've already proven out close to home the International Space Station. We're 3 hours away. We can be there. We can bring them back safely if something goes wrong. Now we're going to take that technology and we're going to put it around the moon. Now we're 3 days away with proven technology and 20 some odd years of time and space consistent. Okay, so we're going to build on that. We need to build a habitat on the surface. How do you build a habitat on the surface? We're not going to go to Home Depot. We're not going to ship a bunch of plywood up there on a rocket. it's ideal if we can build it there using the materials there. Okay, so what about 3D printing? We're exploring with 3D concrete printing right now. I've seen some of the buildings. They're fascinating. Okay, so if I can ship that technology up there and I can find water, now maybe I can use water and I can use the local regolith that's on the moon and I can build a habitat structure. Now, why is that important? Because if I can find water on the moon and if I can build a structure and I can learn how to build a habitat and I can learn how to function in a hostile environment and I can go back and forth from space to the surface as I need to, now I've got a pathway for what to do when I get to Mars. So that's why we're doing moon. That's why Artemis is so important while we're close. So when we go to the moon, go to Mars, we're further away. We can be a little bit more confident, a lot more confident when we get there that it's going to be. Now, the third part of that question was, when are we going to do it? Okay, we got a few years to get there, but every step that we take is a step toward Mars. It's kind of like asking, are we there yet? And the answer always came back, we get closer and closer every time the wheel goes around. Okay, well, that's a true statement. Every time we launch a rocket, every time we go to the moon, every time we land on the moon and we build a habitat or we learn something new, that's one step closer to Mars that we get. So right now we're probably looking probably in the 30s to 50s. Once we start reaching out toward Mars, seems like a little ways out. But the cool part about it is the more we learn on the moon, the more we learn about Mars. And the more we learn about Mars, the more we can actually start thinking about habitat out there.
That's absolutely incredible. So it's in our lifetime, folks. That's the most important thing. It's in our lifetime we will get to Mars. That is really cool. You're listening to COSI Connects, brought to you from COSI.org here in Central Ohio and Columbus. We are speaking with Mr. Hartsfield, the incredible engineer slash IT expert slash, point of control for all things Artemis at NASA. We have one here from Elliot. Now, Elliot is from Liberty Center Middle School, right? So he's a youngster. And he has a statement. I'm going to read a statement, and then I want you to kind of give him some advice. His statement is, my dream is to work for mission control for the Orion project. What will you tell middle schooler from Liberty Center, Mr. Elliot? What would you tell Elliot?
Don't let anything hold you back, Elliot. Dream big and achieve big. So right now you're in middle school. You want to be looking at your STEM projects. You want to get involved in your robotics, look at your math and your science degree, science classes, and really look to learn new things. Every day that goes by, Elliot, you should learn something new and make it a point that by the time you get to the end of the day and you go to bed, you have achieved that simple goal. And I'm not talking about, I learned my pencil's a little bit shorter today. I'm talking about something meaningful like, I learned that the leaves turn color in the fall because of the changing of the fall weather or something like that, something that's science related. Now that's kind of simplistic, but you want to be learning toward your goal. You want to be in mission control. Don't let anything hold you back, and don't let anyone tell you that you can't do it, because you can. You absolutely can. And when you get old enough and you can apply for that internship, do it.
I love that. That is incredible. Elliot, look at your future workplace. This is awesome. So Elliot, follow Mr. Hartsfield's advice. That was great advice. I'll just add one more thing. Talk to your teachers, talk to your parents. Make sure you plan a field trip to NASA, but also plan a field trip to COSI. We're opening November 20th. Definitely come check us out. So we have another question here, and this is interesting. I'm sure you guys talk about this all the time. It says, has the pandemic impacted the Artemis timeline?
I would say no. Many people would say that yes, maybe it has, because we all had to go home and telework. But from my perspective, absolutely not. The Artemis program was deemed mission essential very early on. And the beautiful part about being able to telework, like we're talking right here virtually, is that I can sit in my basement with my NASA laptop in front of me, and I can access all of my NASA systems that I need to access, and I can access my team that I'm in charge of, and I can continue to work and be productive. And I don't let that hold me back. So I take the perspective This desk right here is no different from the desk I might be sitting on when I'm down at the center. And I reach out to my folks and I talk to them and we do our testing. But the Artemis program has been allowed to go back on site, and we follow COVID rules. We all wear, obviously wearing my mask right now. I'm all by myself in my basement. But when we're on site, everybody wears a mask, and we always wash our hands, and we're always using sanitation wipes to make sure the keyboards are wiped down when we're doing the testing. We keep our 6-foot distances. So we follow all those handy rules that are prescribed by NASA. And because of that, we've had no COVID infections in the groups that I've been associated with. And if anyone has got it, it's been pretty minimal. So has it slowed us down? Not in the least. No way.
That's fantastic. That is great to know, because that virus has been a pain in all of us. So the fact that it's not impacting NASA, we love it. That is great. Another question here. So Drew from YouTube, he asks, which rocket will launch the first piece of the gateway?
I'm going to say that it's going to be the SLS vehicle itself. The configuration that we looked at was for the Orion capsule, which is the crewed vehicle. But it's a multi-configuration design. So we can take the capsule off the top of it, and we can put a cargo bay up there. And the larger configuration of that can throw 170 tons into space. And no one else really can do that for deep space injection. So it's going to be the SLS vehicle that's going to put the gateway up there and all that tonnage. Now, I don't want to disparage any of the other folks that are putting rockets up like SpaceX or ULA, because those guys are doing a so important mission right now too. And I know that SpaceX is wanting to do cargo. I know that ULA wants to be a part of that. There's a lot of commercial crews that want to be a part of getting cargo to the moon and being a part of this great adventure. So what will put the gateway up there, I feel pretty strongly it's going to be the SLS because of its capabilities of the mission. Will there be other rockets that are associated with getting pieces, parts, supplies up there? Absolutely.
Well, I think, look, I really appreciate that answer. Talk a little bit about that some more, because Mr. Hartsfield, you know, a lot of times people think there's NASA and then there's these private companies, SpaceX, you know, whoever. But you guys collaborate a lot together, right? So can you share how cool that is that NASA, which is a government organization, is actually working in collaboration with these private, all towards one goal? Talk a little bit about that.
Well, NASA is not a pillar and unto itself. It does work with a lot of the industry partners that are out there. On the SLS alone, just to name a few, you have Boeing, Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, Aerojet Rocketdyne, and I'm trying to think who else. I said Northrop Grumman. And there's a few others that are associated with just the major parts of that. And then each one of them has subcontractors and sub-sources that will feed components into just those main core stage. But you got also the commercial crew portion of things. SpaceX is involved in commercial crew. Boeing's trying to get involved in commercial crew launches. You may have heard some news about that here recently. And of course, we know about SpaceX going to the ISS recently. My lab actually tested some of the SpaceX components that was a go, no-go for the first manned launch from American space. So yay, we got to be a part of that. That was absolutely exciting that we got to be a part of that particular launch in my lab. And the folks that were working there, we're all down there wearing our mask and saying, let's see if it breaks, kind of thing. And that was important. So our commercial partners with NASA are so very important because NASA can't do it by themselves. And there's a lot of talent in all of those commercial partners that are out there. Maybe they used to work at NASA, or maybe they used to work out there and they came to work at NASA. So there's some back and forth that occurs there in talent and acquisition and all that. So yeah, don't let NASA be the end all to everything that you do, because of our commercial partners are absolutely firing on all cylinders.
I love that message, Mr. Hartsfield, because it's so hopeful for the community that, hey, we can get further and better when we work collaboratively, when we work together. So that is great, and that NASA is leading the way in that direction. We're getting close to the end of the show. We're going to have time for 2 more questions. You're listening to Frederic Bertley, President and CEO of COSI. This is COSI Connects from Central Ohio. Of course, we're speaking to none other than Brent Hartsfield from NASA. incredible talent. You can tell how excited he is about working at NASA, which brings me to this great question that says, what's your favorite part of working at NASA?
Yeah, boy, that's a tough question for me because everything is so fun. I've enjoyed the different technologies I've been involved in. I've enjoyed the different labs that I get to go and see, the life-size models of the things that I work on and the work in. But really the biggest part of it is my personal part of seeing those things launch. I know when I see the Dragon space capsule dock with the space station, I had a piece of that. I know when the SLS fires off, I had a piece of that because I applied myself, I applied for the job, and now I'm in a position where I get to mess with all of that, and I get to be a part of it. And I get to be a part of a big, awesome, amazing team of folks, and all of us are going to the same goal, which is the moon and beyond. So yes, that's my favorite part, is being a part of that.
Okay, that's true. So related, okay, what's your favorite, that you're allowed to share, that is, what's your favorite piece of NASA swag you have in the office or at home?
Ooh, my favorite piece of NASA swag. Okay, it's funny as it is, but it's probably about that big. Well, there you go. It's about that big, probably about half an inch tall. It is a small resistor. And so what happened, it's a good story behind it. When I was working in the SIL, we had what was called an emulator. That emulator pretended to be the Orion capsule and its interface to the core stage, because you have to talk back and forth.
Sure.
And we had a problem with it. We couldn't figure it out. And an integration lab's job is to figure it out and get them talking. And we scratched our heads and we rolled all over the place looking for the solution to that. And it came down to one itty bitty resistor. And I have that one resistor that was burned out, and I still have it today. That I think was my favorite thing right there. It's worth nothing today. It costs maybe a dime, but it's important to me.
That's absolutely incredible. That a great NASA event is handicapped by a dime piece of resistor. That is fabulous.
Well, just to clarify, that was an emulator. It wasn't the Orion capsule itself. It was just something it pretended to be. But
fair enough.
All the same, that was important. It was a big deal.
That's a terrific story. So we got one more question before we close. And again, this is COSI Connects. We have NASA here on tap. They have this great program where they showcase their talented team members for the public and for students and teachers alike. So thank you all for joining us. The last question, and you did talk about this a little bit as you were closing, but I just want you to kind of land on this one again, because it's so important for our listeners. What advice would you give to the kids who are watching right now to follow in your footsteps?
Dream, like I said earlier to Elliot, dream big and don't let anything hold you back. Every day, ask questions and learn something new. I believe firmly that the only stupid question is the one you don't ask. I also believe for all of you older folks out there, the only stupid question you don't, or the only stupid answer is the one you don't give. That is the epitome of being a mentor and someone who is eager to learn. Young folks, ask questions. Old folks, answer the questions. Let's help our next generation grow into the amazing generation they're going to be. My advice to you young folks, get out there, apply yourself, study, learn, and don't let anything hold you back from your dreams.
Mr. Hartsfield, I can safely say you are walking the talk. You are an absolute incredible mentor. It was a pleasure to interview you today. I'd like to thank you. I'd like to thank NASA for all of your time. I especially want to thank Patricia Moore for putting on this program and bringing excellent individuals time after time. Ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to COSI Connects from COSI, connecting you to a universe of science. I'm Frederic Bertley. I want to thank my team, Hannah Beeler, Jenna Maffey, and Doug Buchanan, for this great collaboration. A shout out to Jim Bridenstine. He's a huge fan of ours, and we're a bigger fan of his. We look forward to more programming with you. Thank you so much, all. Thank you for your participants, especially you out there. Please pay attention to our programs. And one last announcement. On December 3rd, which is a Thursday, December 3rd at 3 p.m., we will be interviewing and live streaming none other than the famous astronaut Kathy Sullivan. She was an astronaut. She was the first American woman to walk in space, second woman in the world to walk in space. She will be live with us on COSI Connects on December 3rd, part of the Color Science program. I want to give another shout out to NASA and Mr. Brent Hartsfield. Thank you so much for spending the afternoon with us today. You're an incredible role model. Look forward to following the launch of all the great stuff, including, of course, the Artemis project.
It's my pleasure to be here.
You got it. We'll stay in touch.
Take care.
Bye-bye.